2 weeks ago today, I was made aware of a plan to have death row inmate Mr. Shermantine brought to San Joaquin and Calaveras counties to identify possible burial sites of homicide victims. Upon learning of this plan, I expressed my grave concern for the safety of county residents if he should be able to make a successful escape attempt. Because of this concern, I contacted the director of CDCR, Mr. Cate, for additional information regarding which agency was conducting the investigation, which prompted this unusual action, and what type of security arrangements were going to be made. Director Cate indicated to me the request was at the direction of the FBI and local agencies, and they were looking into assisting them if possible. I then contacted my colleague at FBI Sacramento, Supervising Special Agent Mr. Herb Brown, and asked if the FBI was conducting an investigation involving Mr. Shermantine. Agent Brown said the FBI was not conducting any investigation, but had told Calaveras County Sheriff's Office that they would be able to provide support from their ERT, Evidence Recovering Team, should they desire. I next contacted District Attorney Willett, asking if their office was conducting an investigation, coordinating such a plan, or were they aware of any and what agency was involved. Mr. Willett told me that he was not aware of any investigation being conducted by his office or any other agency doing so. I was then able to make contact with Calaveras County Sheriff Kuntz to see what information of any investigation he had involving his agency. Sheriff Kuntz said they were not conducting any investigation. However, if there were any decedents located in Calaveras County, they would need the assistance of the FBI ERT team, as they did not have the necessary resources to handle such a task. As this was the first I had been aware of such a plan, coupled with the information that no established agency of jurisdiction was conducting any such investigation, my level of concern was heightened for the safety of county residents. I then recontacted CDCR Director Cate and requested a meeting involving the impacted agencies to clarify what, in fact, was taking place and who was coordinating the effort. Further, I asked that until such clarification could be made and security plans reviewed, Mr. Shermantine not be transported to San Joaquin County. Director Cate indicated there was a meeting on Wednesday of that week to follow up on the transportation plans, but that he understood my request and asked that I call for a meeting of all the players in order to get full clarification. I was subsequently contacted by Deputy District Attorney Mr. Tom Testa regarding the situation. Mr. Testa said he was aware that Mr. Reinick and Mr. Padilla had been in contact with Mr. Shermantine regarding his offer to point out potential burial sites. I told Mr. Testa that I was totally unaware of who Mr. Reinick was. Mr. Testa said he was a private investigator and former FBI agent who had interviewed Mr. Shermantine. I told Mr. Testa I was holding a meeting of all the involved agencies and asked that if possible he should attend the meeting. Mr. Testa asked if Mr. Reinick could be invited, and I agreed that if Mr. Reinick wished to do so, he could attend the meeting at 10 o'clock, giving the agency representatives an opportunity to sort through things before meeting with him. Mr. Testa advised he would extend the invitation. On Friday, January 20th, at my request, representatives from CDCR, the San Joaquin District Attorney's Office, FBI, Calaveras Sheriff, and San Joaquin County Sheriff's Office met at my office to discuss the situation and all possible alternatives. During the meeting, it was established that none of the local law enforcement agencies nor the FBI had requested or were conducting any investigation or had made any official request to have Mr. Shermantine brought to either San Joaquin or Calaveras counties to point out potential burial sites. Mr. Testa said it was Mr. Reinick and Mr. Padilla who were the persons involved and were exploring the transportation of Mr. Shermantine with CDCR. Mr. Testa further related that it was his belief that Mr. Shermantine was a changed man and that if we were going to be able to recover any decedents, Mr. Shermantine was now calling the shots, which may require multiple transportations. Mr. Testa also related that Mr. Reinick had declined the invitation for the 10 o'clock appointment. At the end of the meeting, District Attorney Willett, Calaveras Sheriff Kuntz, and myself agreed to forward a letter to be drafted by Mr. Willett to CDCR requesting that they complete the planning process for such transportation in the future should circumstances dictate such action. As Sheriff Coroner, it is one of my responsibilities to recover any decedent whenever possible. But that responsibility does not relieve me of my duty to provide for the safety and security of all county residents. I still have grave concerns that should Mr. Shermantine be brought out of death row, there exists a great potential of an escape attempt or potential suicide by cop in an attempt by Mr. Shermantine to defeat justice, as he has nothing to lose. I acutely recall the fear expressed by this community when Mr. Herzog was going to be paroled back to San Joaquin County, and believe that there would be even greater fear on the part of the county residents should Mr. Shermantine utilize any transportation as an opportunity to make a successful escape. I believe it only reasonable and prudent to explore any and all available information regarding potential burial sites before making decision on the transportation of Mr. Shermantine. This previous week, record reporter Scott Smith spoke with my homicide investigators, providing information from his previous correspondence from Mr. Shermantine and a recent letter giving directions to a possible burial site in Calaveras County. From that information, San Joaquin homicide investigators teamed up with Calaveras County investigators who had secured permission from the property owner to conduct a search of the provided location. That search, utilizing cadaver dogs, metal detectors, and digging up the site, did not reveal any remains. In order for us to be successful in making the recovery of any decedents, all parties need to communicate, coordinate, and cooperate in order to bring closure for all the families. I would welcome any and all cooperation from either Mr. Rennick, Mr. Padilla, the record, or any other persons who may have information that will allow us to make such recoveries, to include the transportation of Mr. Shermantine to point out potential burial sites should that be the only alternative. We have received phone calls from Mr. Padilla and encourage him to schedule a meeting with homicide investigators this week. However, any actions we take must be conducted in such a manner as to provide for the safety and security of all persons involved and the safeguarding of the civil rights of any potential defendants as we seek to bring much-needed closure to the victims' families. My only desire is to successfully accomplish both missions, that of recovering any and all decedents while providing for the overall safety and security of San Joaquin County residents. In light of the letter I received this morning from the Office of the State Public Defender, which is representing Mr. Shermantine in his appeals, I would welcome a review by the Attorney General's office and stand ready to work collaboratively with them in any way to support the completion of the appeals process.
At this time, are you open to Mr. Shermantine being transported here to this county and Calaveras County? And what about the timing of all of this? Because as you can imagine, some of these victims' families are incredibly anxious for closure.
As I stated in my notes here, that is a possibility. If there's no other way to try to attempt to gain closure and our only possibility of doing it, I will be willing to follow through with that.
So what are the next steps and what would be the time frame? Obviously, you won't tell the media when you're going out and what you're doing. We understand that, but what are your next steps?
My next steps at this point is to get the letter completed that Mr. Willett says he is drafting, get that to Secretary Matt Cate, to work through the potential plans for transporting Mr. Shermantine at a time and place that is of the CDCR department's choosing for their safety and security. Then I want to make sure that the safety and security for the residents of San Joaquin County is afforded to them in that place. In the meantime, I'm truly hoping that Mr. Rennick, okay, and Mr. Padilla, or anyone else that has information after either contacting Mr. Shermantine or has other information will be willing to come forward at this time and provide us what locations they would have, and we will go out and look for and try to recover any and all persons.
At this point, do you even know if Shermantine is willing to go out with sheriff's deputies or with your agency?
I'm not aware of that either way.
What circumstances would you consider Mr. Shermantine to be secure enough to bring into San Joaquin County? What kind of manpower are we talking about with CDCR? What's the ratio you want to say?
I can't give you an answer to that. I will rely on CDCR as they are the agency currently responsible for Mr. Shermantine. Okay? So I will bow to their deference on the issue, but I just want to know what they are so that I can make any additional plans I feel are necessary.
Since they are responsible for him, from your perspective, 2 weeks ago, if they were assuming that responsibility and one of their own staff members met with Mr. Shermantine, in addition to another individual here from the Stockton area and the former FBI agent, there were 3 people in the room. Why not 2 weeks ago allow them to come out with Shermantine if they are assuming that responsibility?
Because 2 weeks ago, I didn't know any of those 3 things you just said. I didn't know who had spoken to Mr. Shermantine. I didn't know what their involvement was. The only notice I got was there was a plan in place to bring Mr. Shermantine here. And with no knowledge, no information, no reassurances, I have very real concerns. And I'm going to speak to those concerns to take care of the safety and security of the residents of this county.
Your spokesman was quoted as saying one of the reasons that this search didn't go on or bring him out there was because too many civilians knew what was going on. What information do you have that civilians knew what was going on?
It is our understanding at this point that there was more information put out. As you will recall, the information regarding even bringing Mr. Shermantine here was not released by this office.
You're saying you're inviting Mr. Reineck to come to you and provide information, because I think it's his understanding that you've excluded him from this, including that Friday meeting. Can you clarify that?
I have never excluded Mr. Reineck. I have never excluded Mr. Padilla. In fact, I didn't know Mr. Reineck's name until Mr. Testa called and gave me his name. And I would be more than willing to meet with him, have him provide any information he feels appropriate in order to bring closure to the families.
And so what's next? I think somebody else asked you that already, but do you have any searches planned regardless of transporting Mr. Shermantine, or are you waiting for more information, or what's next?
We're still sorting through the information that's been provided to us. As those reveal places that we can search, we will conduct whatever search is available. If anyone else has any other information, we will move forward with that.
Okay, one more question.
Is there concern, there's been information revealed that perhaps Mr. Shermantine said there's bodies on the Herzog family property. Are you concerned that the Herzog, they still live there, are you concerned that they're gonna try and dig it up before you get there and hide the evidence? If you wait too long?
I have no intention of waiting too long. We're working with what we have, and we have to work with what the confines of the law are at this point. Regardless of whether or not these were remains of any persons that have already been adjudicated, through prosecution or not, we still need to do the things appropriately, and that's what I'm going to do.